I always believed family was the safest harbor when a storm hit. I was wrong. My own brother left his flesh and blood out to freeze in 32-degree weather, choosing pure greed over a human life. He thought he could weave a web of lies to destroy me and cover his tracks. But he forgot one crucial detail about the bitter winter cold. It preserves evidence perfectly. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now let's begin the story. My name is Aurora Mitchell. The hum of the server operations center at Zenith Meridian Corporation usually offered a quiet, predictable rhythm during my night shifts. It was a sprawling room filled with blinking lights, endless rows of dark metal racks, and the continuous drone of cooling fans. It was a sanctuary of logic and order. Tonight, however, that order was about to be shattered. The digital clock on the wall glowed bright red, reading exactly 2:15 in the morning. Outside the reinforced windows, a massive winter storm was hammering the city, burying the deserted streets under thick sheets of white snow. I was deep into monitoring the external network traffic, enjoying the solitude, when my personal cell phone suddenly buzzed on the metal desk. An unknown number flashed on the bright screen. Normally, I would ignore it, assuming it was a misdial or an automated spam call. But something stopped me. An unexplainable tight knot formed in the pit of my stomach. I reached out and pressed the green button. "Hello?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the vast room. There was no immediate answer, only the sound of heavy, ragged breathing and a strange, high-pitched whistling noise in the background. It sounded like a brutal wind. "Hello, who is this?" I repeated, sitting up straighter in my chair. "Aunt Aurora." The voice was barely a whisper, weak and trembling so violently that the syllables were fractured. "Please, help me." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Julian, oh my God. Julian, is that you? Where are you? You sound freezing." It was my nephew Julian. He was only 19 years old, a bright college freshman who was supposed to be spending his winter break relaxing at his father's luxury mountain cabin. Instead, he sounded like he was fighting for his last breath. "They locked me out," Julian gasped. His teeth were chattering so hard, the harsh clicking sound echoed through the tiny phone speaker. "Dad and Vanessa. They threw me out of the mountain resort. It is 32 degrees out here, maybe colder with the wind chill. I have nowhere to go. Everything is locked." "What are you talking about?" "Why would Marcus do that?" I demanded. I was already out of my chair, grabbing my heavy coat and car keys from the desk drawer. My mind was racing, trying to comprehend the sheer cruelty of the situation. "I found something," Julian cried, his voice breaking into a breathless sob. "Vanessa's financial documents, secret offshore accounts, millions of dollars hidden away. She caught me looking at her open laptop in the study. She started screaming. Dad came in, and they just dragged me to the front porch and slammed the deadbolt. Aunt Aurora, I cannot feel my legs anymore. The cold hurts so much. I am so scared." "Listen to me, Julian. Do not panic. Share your location with me right now. Drop a pin on the map application and send it to this number. Do not go to sleep. Keep moving your arms and legs. I am coming for you right now." "My battery is dying from the cold," he sobbed, the despair thick in his throat. "It is dropping so fast. It is at 2%. Please hurry. I do not want to die out here." The line went dead with a sharp click. Silence filled my ear. A moment later, a loud ping alerted me to a new text message containing his precise GPS coordinates. He was 10 miles up the winding mountain pass, far from any neighboring houses or open businesses. I sprinted out of the server room, down the long corridor, and burst through the back exit into the freezing night. The drive out of the city and up the treacherous mountain roads was a terrifying nightmare. Visibility was practically zero. Thick, heavy flakes of snow hurled against my windshield like thousands of white daggers, completely blinding my view of the road ahead. The heater in my car was blasting hot air at full capacity, yet a deep chill seeped into my bones just thinking about my young nephew exposed to those brutal elements. I pushed the gas pedal down as far as I dared, my tires slipping and sliding on the dangerous black ice. I fought the vibrating steering wheel with white knuckles, desperate to keep the vehicle from careening off the steep mountain edges. The digital thermometer on my dashboard dropped steadily, settling at 30 degrees. The brutal wind chill up on that exposed mountain would easily push the actual temperature down into the single digits. Time was slipping away, and every second meant the difference between life and death for Julian. After what felt like an absolute eternity of navigating the treacherous blizzard, I finally reached the desolate stretch of highway near the exact coordinates his phone had transmitted. There were no streetlights up here, only the piercing narrow beams of my headlights slicing through the swirling white chaos. I rolled down my window, letting the icy wind whip across my face, and scanned the dark sides of the road frantically. Then I saw it. A dark, unnatural lump, half buried in a massive snowbank, just off the gravel shoulder. I slammed my foot on the brakes, the car skidding violently before jerking to a halt. I left the engine running, leaped out into the freezing gale, and plunged into the deep snow. "Julian!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, but the roaring wind tore the name straight from my throat, carrying it away into the absolute darkness. I rushed over to the snowbank and fell to my knees. It was him. He was curled into a tight, miserable ball, desperately trying to conserve whatever body heat he had left. My stomach dropped when I saw what he was wearing. Just a thin autumn jacket, a pair of worn denim jeans, and basic canvas sneakers. He had no winter hat, no thick scarf, and no gloves to protect his extremities. I grabbed his shoulders and pulled him into my arms, turning his face toward the dim light of my idling car. His skin was shocking to touch. It felt like holding a block of solid ice. His lips had turned a terrifying dark shade of blue, and his bare hands were a sickly purple color, the fingers stiff and completely unbending. Frost clung to his eyelashes and eyebrows. His eyes were only half open, glazed over, and staring blankly into the dark void. His breathing was so incredibly shallow and irregular that I had to press my ear directly against his icy chest just to hear the faint, struggling rattle of his lungs. He was slipping away fast. "Julian, stay with me. You are safe now. I am right here." I begged, my voice cracking with overwhelming panic. I ripped off my own heavy, insulated winter coat and wrapped it tightly around his violently shivering body, tucking the edges firmly under his back. I hooked my arms under his armpits, dug my boots into the slippery snow, and began dragging his dead weight back toward my car. Every single step was pure agony. My muscles burned and the relentless wind howled like a wounded beast, throwing sharp, stinging ice crystals directly against my exposed face. With a final desperate surge of pure adrenaline, I managed to heave his unresponsive body into the passenger seat. I slammed the door shut, trapping the heat inside, and immediately tilted the air vents to blast the maximum hot air directly onto his frozen hands and face. I threw the car back into drive, my hands shaking violently on the steering wheel, and sped back down the dark mountain, heading straight for the nearest city hospital. Julian remained completely unresponsive beside me, his head lolling limply against the cold glass of the window. Pure suffocating panic clawed at my throat. I desperately needed to alert the emergency room so they would be ready the second we arrived. I reached over and grabbed my cell phone from the center console. As my thumb swiped upward to unlock the glowing screen, a sudden barrage of new text messages flooded the display, vibrating wildly in my palm. They were not from the hospital. They were from Marcus. "Do not even think about sticking your nose into my family business, Aurora. Julian needs to learn respect and discipline. Leave him alone out there. He will walk back when he's ready to apologize. If you interfere and pick him up, you will seriously regret it. He is my son, not yours. Back off." I stared at the glowing words illuminating the dark cabin of the car. A profound, icy fury began rising deep within my chest, completely drowning out the freezing temperature of the night and the panic that had consumed me moments before. My own brother, a man who shared my blood, had intentionally abandoned his 19-year-old son to die a slow, agonizing death in the freezing snow, all to protect his new wife and her dirty financial secrets. And now, as his son lay dying in my passenger seat, he had the absolute audacity to threaten me from the warmth and comfort of his luxury resort. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned stark white. I tossed the phone back onto the console and pressed the gas pedal down even harder, the engine roaring in the quiet night. Marcus thought he was untouchable. He thought he could control everyone with money threats and fear. But he had made a fatal miscalculation tonight. I was not going to back down, and I was not going to let this go. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm I was about to bring down on his head. The glaring fluorescent lights of the emergency room were a harsh, sterile contrast to the pitch-black, chaotic blizzard I had just navigated. I paced the scuffed linoleum floor of the waiting area, my boots leaving small, melting puddles of dirty snow. The sharp, bitter smell of medical-grade antiseptic stung my nose, doing nothing to settle the violent twisting in my stomach. Every second that ticked by on the large analog wall clock felt like an agonizing hour. Finally, a man in dark green scrubs and a white coat pushed through the heavy double doors of the trauma ward. Dr. Aris looked exhausted, his expression grim and tight. I rushed toward him, my hands trembling slightly. "He is stable for now, but his condition is incredibly serious," the doctor stated, his voice flat, but carrying a devastating weight. "Julian is suffering from stage 3 severe hypothermia. When you brought him through those doors, his core body temperature had plummeted to dangerously lethal levels. His body had already begun shutting down blood flow to his extremities to protect his vital organs. We are implementing active internal rewarming protocols right now. However, he has sustained significant deep tissue damage to both of his legs, specifically around his calves and his feet. The frostbite is extensive." He paused, letting out a heavy sigh before looking directly into my eyes. "I need you to understand the reality of this situation, ma'am. Given his lack of insulated clothing and the brutal wind chill factor outside his survival is nothing short of a miracle. To be completely frank with you, if you had found him 10 minutes later, his heart would have gone into fatal arrhythmia. He would have lost his life tonight." The sheer gravity of his words hit me like a physical blow. 10 minutes. My nephew had been 10 minutes away from freezing to death on an empty road. Because of the life-threatening nature of Julian's injuries and the suspicious circumstances of his arrival, the hospital administration was legally obligated to contact law enforcement. Officer Hayes, a seasoned local patrolman with a thick leather-bound notepad and a wary, observant expression, arrived shortly after the medical update. He pulled me aside into a quiet alcove near the vending machines to gather the initial facts. "Can you walk me through exactly how you located the young man, ma'am?" Officer Hayes asked, clicking his pen. I took a slow, deep breath, forcing my heart rate to steady. I began detailing the terrifying phone call, the desperate drive up the mountain, and the state I found Julian in. I needed my account to be clear, factual, and incredibly credible. I was just about to explain the threatening text messages still sitting on my phone when the heavy automatic sliding doors of the emergency entrance hissed open with a violent, sudden swoosh. A blast of freezing air rushed into the lobby, followed immediately by Marcus and Vanessa. There was absolutely no frantic rushing. There were no tear-stained cheeks, no panicked questioning of the nursing staff, no desperate pleas to see their dying son. Instead, they looked thoroughly annoyed, as if they had just been terribly inconvenienced during an exclusive high-society dinner party. Marcus strode in wearing a custom-tailored dark wool cashmere coat, his posture rigidly straight with pure indignation rather than paternal fear. Vanessa walked briskly beside him, draped head to toe in an expensive designer winter wardrobe, clutching a glossy leather handbag like a defensive shield. They marched aggressively past the reception desk and locked eyes with me standing next to the uniformed officer. "There she is," Marcus barked, his voice booming abrasively through the quiet ward, drawing startled looks from several exhausted nurses. He pointed a dark leather-gloved finger directly at my face. "Officer, I want this woman arrested immediately. She unlawfully abducted my son from my private property." Tss. Officer Hayes held up a firm hand, stepping slightly between us. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice. This is a hospital. Are you the father?" "I am Marcus Sutherland," he declared, puffing out his chest with sheer, unadulterated arrogance. "This woman is my sister Aurora. She is completely unhinged. She drove onto my private mountain resort property, kidnapped Julian in the middle of a massive blizzard, and is now trying to use him to extort a massive financial payout from my family. She wants to ruin my corporate reputation. She is orchestrating a malicious, calculated smear campaign against me." Before I could even fully process the staggering audacity of his fabricated story, Vanessa stepped forward. She placed a delicately trembling hand over her chest, her facial expression instantly morphing into the perfect picture of a deeply traumatized, heartbroken mother. It was an absolute masterclass in sociopathic manipulation. "Officer, please, you have to understand," Vanessa pleaded, her voice catching flawlessly, forcing a single tear to spill over her eyelashes. "Julian has been severely mentally unstable for months. We have been trying so hard to get him intensive psychiatric help. Tonight he had a complete violent psychotic break. He went into an absolute frenzy, broke into my personal office safe, stole several highly valuable family heirlooms, and just ran blindly off into the storm. Aurora has always fed his delusions because she is deeply jealous of our financial success. She must have coaxed him out there to steal from us. He is sick, and she is exploiting him." The sheer suffocating weight of their coordinated lies hung heavily in the sterile hospital air. A younger, more impulsive version of myself would have screamed. I would have launched myself at Marcus, called him a cold-blooded monster, and furiously denied every single filthy word leaving their mouths. I would have lost my temper and played right into their meticulously crafted trap, making myself look exactly like the unhinged, hysterical woman they were painting me out to be. Instead, I clamped my jaw shut. I let a heavy, prolonged silence stretch between us. I looked at Marcus, taking in the smug, arrogant tilt of his chin, then shifted my piercing gaze to Vanessa, observing the theatrical fake sorrow etched onto her perfectly made-up face. I felt a white-hot, consuming rage burning deep within my chest, but I consciously locked it away behind an impenetrable, solid wall of ice. I turned my back on them, completely dismissing their entire existence, and looked straight into the eyes of Officer Hayes. "Officer," I said, my voice eerily calm, smooth, and meticulously deliberate, "I will absolutely not engage with these baseless, desperate, and frankly absurd accusations right now. My only concern is the 19-year-old boy lying in a trauma bed fighting to keep his legs from being amputated. I formally request that you immediately go to the attending physician, Dr. Aris, and secure a full certified copy of Julian's initial medical assessment." I took a step closer to the officer, ensuring every single syllable was heard clearly by the two monsters standing behind me. "I want his precise core body temperature upon arrival, the exact extent of the frostbite and tissue damage, and the doctor's professional sworn medical estimation of exactly how many hours he was exposed to sub-freezing temperatures, documented as official, undisputed evidence for the state." I paused, letting the clinical, undeniable legal weight of my request settle heavily over the group. "Because when the time comes," I added softly, my eyes flicking over my shoulder to meet Marcus's suddenly faltering gaze, "the medical science will tell you exactly who is lying." Leaving Julian under the strict, watchful eyes of the intensive care nursing staff, I collected his frozen personal effects stored in a clear plastic hospital bag. Inside lay his shattered, waterlogged cell phone and a smart watch with a cracked face. I drove straight back to the secure server operations center at Zenith Meridian Corporation. The massive storm was still raging outside, but inside my digital fortress, the temperature was a perfectly controlled 68 degrees. I swiped my top-tier access badge, locked the heavy steel door behind me, and walked over to my dedicated diagnostic workstation. I was not just a concerned aunt tonight. I was a senior network security engineer, and I was about to dissect my brother's lies piece by digital piece. Julian's phone was completely unresponsive. The extreme cold had caused the lithium battery to critically fail, and condensation had seeped into the charging port. I bypassed the standard power circuit entirely. Using a set of micro-precision tools, I carefully opened the frozen casing, connected a direct data bridge to the internal flash memory module, and booted up a specialized raw data cloning software. A progress bar appeared on my massive curved monitor, slowly crawling from 0 to 100%. The screen illuminated my face in the dark room. For 45 agonizing minutes, I watched the system meticulously rebuild the fragmented file directory. When the clone was finally complete, I began sifting through the wreckage of his digital life. I bypassed the applications and went straight for the hidden cache directories. My eyes scanned thousands of lines of code until I spotted an anomaly in the native voice recorder application folder. It was an audio file generated exactly 3 hours before Julian called me. It had not been properly saved or titled. It was abruptly cut off, indicating the recording was violently interrupted or the device was suddenly dropped. I routed the audio output through my high-fidelity studio headphones, closed my eyes, and pressed play. The recording started with the chaotic sounds of a violent physical struggle. There was the heavy thud of a body hitting a wooden floor, followed immediately by Vanessa shrieking. Then Marcus's voice boomed through the speakers. His tone was not panicked. It was completely calculated, dripping with venomous cruelty. "You want to snoop around in adult business, Julian? You want to play the righteous investigator," Marcus snarled. "Then you can learn what the real world feels like. Get out." Julian's voice, desperate and terrified, begged them to stop. "Dad, please, I have no coat. Give me my keys." Marcus simply laughed, a cold, empty sound. "You can walk the 10 miles back to the city to learn some survival skills. Maybe the cold will snap some respect into you." The audio captured the unmistakable heavy scrape of the front door dragging open, a violent shove, and then the chilling mechanical clack of the electronic deadbolt sliding firmly into place. The recording ended with the deafening roar of the blizzard wind. I pulled the headphones off my hands, shaking with a mixture of profound grief and explosive rage. Marcus had not just kicked him out. He had condemned him. He knew exactly how far they were from civilization. He knew the weather conditions. This was not a disciplinary measure. It was an attempted execution. I immediately exported the raw audio file, encrypted it with a military-grade algorithm, and duplicated it across 3 separate secure external drives. I had the motive, and I had the weapon. Now I needed the timeline. I plugged Julian's smartwatch into my secondary terminal. The screen was dead, but the internal solid-state drive was still intact. I extracted the raw global positioning system logs and synced them with a satellite mapping program. The mapping software instantly plotted a bright red dot directly on the front porch coordinates of Marcus's luxury mountain cabin. I watched the timestamps roll forward. According to the biometric data and the location tracking, Julian did not run wildly into the woods in a manic episode like Vanessa had tearfully claimed to the police. He stood perfectly still on that freezing porch. He stood there for 3 agonizing hours. His heart rate monitor recorded his sheer panic, the spikes in his pulse as he likely banged on the heavy oak door, begging his own father for mercy while the temperature steadily dropped. There was one final piece to this puzzle. Marcus's luxury cabin was heavily fortified with a top-tier smart home security system. I pulled up the main residential network registry. Because I had originally set up his home network security 5 years ago before our relationship soured, I still knew his administrative architectural framework. I masked my internet protocol address and remotely pinged the central router of the cabin. Just as I suspected, the local hard drive storage for the exterior porch cameras had been manually wiped. The deletion log showed it happened exactly 20 minutes after they locked Julian outside. Marcus was thoroughly covering his tracks, erasing the visual proof of his crime. But Marcus, for all his arrogant corporate brilliance, was practically illiterate when it came to modern cloud infrastructure. He thought pressing delete on a master keypad erased history. He had completely forgotten about the automated off-site backup servers I had configured to ping every 15 minutes. I rerouted my connection, bypassed the cabin entirely, and accessed the remote shadow server hosted on a different continent. It took only 5 minutes to bypass the dormant security firewall. There, sitting perfectly preserved in high-definition video, was the entire unedited security footage. I downloaded the video files and played them on my third monitor. It was silent, but the images were damning. The footage clearly showed the front door swinging open. It showed Marcus forcefully shoving a stumbling, terrified Julian out into the driving snow. It showed Vanessa standing in the background, her arms crossed, watching coldly. It showed the heavy door slamming shut. And it showed a 19-year-old boy curling into a corner of the porch, wrapping his thin arms around his shivering torso, waiting for a father who would never open the door again. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, staring at the glowing screen surrounding me. The digital footprints were absolutely flawless. I had forged an unbreakable chain of evidence. They thought the snow would bury their sins, but I had just resurrected the truth. By the time the morning sun finally broke through the heavy gray winter clouds, my digital life was entirely on fire. Vanessa had not wasted a single second. While I was busy extracting the encrypted truth from shattered hardware in my secure lab, she was busy weaving a glamorous, tragic lie across every major social media network. Because of her previous career in high-level public relations, she possessed a massive following and a vast network of influential media contacts. She dropped a beautifully formatted, incredibly lengthy public statement right as the morning news cycle began. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping black coffee, reading the absolute fiction she had manufactured. She painted herself and Marcus as the heartbroken, desperate victims of a calculated family betrayal. She explicitly named me, branding me as the bitter, underachieving sister who had spent years seething with agonizing jealousy over her brother's incredible financial empire. According to her beautifully crafted narrative, I was a technological mastermind using my career at Zenith Meridian Corporation to hack into their private lives. She claimed I was exploiting her stepson's fragile mental state, manipulating a vulnerable 19-year-old boy into turning against his own family just so I could extort them for millions of dollars. The post was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood, complete with a heavily filtered, emotionally manipulative video clip of Vanessa wiping away perfectly timed tears begging for privacy during this devastating family crisis. The internet, always incredibly hungry for a wealthy family scandal, swallowed the fake narrative whole. Within 2 hours, the post had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. My personal cell phone began vibrating so violently it danced across the granite countertop. The digital mob had officially arrived. Hundreds, then thousands of direct messages flooded my private inbox. They called me a gold digger, a sociopath, a jealous parasite, trying to ruin a beautiful family. Complete strangers sent graphic, highly detailed death threats, promising to hunt me down for destroying a loving home. Someone maliciously published my home address, forcing me to keep all the blinds drawn and the security system armed. They quickly found my professional profiles and began heavily spamming my employer. My corporate email account was suddenly paralyzed by an avalanche of automated hate mail, fake negative reviews, and thousands of angry users demanding my immediate termination. It was deeply suffocating. This was the true toxic power of the elite class. They did not need to physically fight you in the streets. They simply bought the narrative, manipulated the algorithm, and let the misguided public tear your life apart piece by piece. By 10 o'clock in the morning, my desk phone rang at the office. It was the executive director of human resources requesting my immediate presence on the executive floor. I walked into the sprawling glass-walled office expecting a highly tense confrontation. The director, a formidable woman named Eleanor, sat behind her massive mahogany desk, gesturing to a leather chair. She looked gravely concerned, tapping a perfectly manicured finger against a thick printed stack of the vicious emails currently crashing the company servers. "Aurora, we have a massive public relations crisis on our hands," Eleanor stated, her tone strictly professional, but carrying an undeniable weight. The media circus surrounding your family is creating a severe liability for Zenith Meridian Corporation. Our board of directors needs a direct, honest explanation regarding these extremely serious extortion allegations right now. I did not raise my voice. I did not break down and cry. I simply opened my heavy leather briefcase and slid a single officially stamped document across the polished wood of her desk. It was the certified medical evaluation from Dr. Aris. "Read the third paragraph, Eleanor," I said calmly. I watched her sharp eyes scan the clinical descriptions of Stage 3 severe hypothermia, the profound tissue necrosis, and the brutal medical reality that my nephew was mere minutes away from fatal cardiac arrest due to prolonged freezing exposure. The heavy oppressive silence in the office stretched out for 2 full minutes. When Eleanor finally looked up from the paper, the corporate concern had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, undeniable outrage. She grabbed the thick stack of printed hate mail and shoved it directly into the industrial shredder next to her desk. "The company legal team will instantly block all external harassment targeting your work accounts," Eleanor declared firmly, her voice leaving no room for debate. "You have the absolute unwavering support of the entire executive board. We do not bow to manufactured internet mobs, and we certainly do not abandon our people when they are doing the right thing." Empowered by the massive corporate shield, I left the office building and drove straight back to the medical center. The social media frenzy meant freelance reporters and gossip bloggers were already starting to sniff around the hospital lobby, aggressively looking for a lucrative scoop. I marched directly to the administration desk on the intensive care floor. Armed with my temporary medical power of attorney, which Julian had weakly signed right before his emergency tissue debridement surgery, I enacted a total impenetrable lockdown. I instructed the head nurse to place a strictly classified status on his room. His name was entirely scrubbed from the main patient registry. I hired 2 heavily armed off-duty police officers out of my own pocket to stand guard at the heavy double doors of his ward 24 hours a day. I gave them explicit, unwavering instructions: no members of the press, no random visitors, and absolutely under zero circumstances were Marcus or Vanessa allowed within 100 feet of that hospital room. They were trying to break my spirit out there in the digital world, hoping the sheer crushing pressure of public opinion would force me to surrender and hand Julian back to them. But they completely failed to realize I was fortifying the physical walls around him, ensuring their toxic, abusive reach would never threaten his fragile recovery. Let them scream their lies into the internet void. The real battle was coming to the real world, and I was holding an unbeatable hand. With Julian completely secure behind heavily guarded doors, I shifted my focus entirely from defense to a highly calculated offense. The digital mob was still screaming outside my virtual windows, but I completely ignored them. I needed a legal predator, someone who understood how to dismantle a billionaire's armor piece by piece. I reached out to Richard Sterling, arguably the most ruthless and highly respected criminal attorney in the entire state. Richard was not the kind of lawyer who filed polite paperwork or asked for quiet settlements. He was the kind of man who destroyed entire corporate empires before lunch. We spent 5 grueling hours in his downtown high-rise office mapping out every single legal vulnerability Marcus possessed. We drafted a massive watertight civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, reckless endangerment, and severe defamation. Sterling calculated the financial damages in the tens of millions of dollars, more than enough to completely gut my brother's precious public facade. But a civil suit was simply not enough to satisfy the absolute freezing rage burning in my chest. I wanted Marcus in a concrete cell. I wanted him completely stripped of his freedom. To achieve that, I needed to set a trap so perfectly baited that his own massive ego would blindly walk him right into it. I pulled out my cell phone and deliberately crafted a text message to my brother. I typed carefully, ensuring my tone sounded utterly defeated, exhausted, and broken by the intense online harassment Vanessa had engineered. I told him the professional pressure at my job was becoming entirely too much to handle. The public hate was terrifying, and I just wanted the nightmare to finally stop. I practically begged for a neutral mediation meeting at the local police precinct, offering to discuss handing over Julian's medical guardianship if they would agree to permanently delete the malicious social media posts and publicly clear my name. It took exactly 4 minutes for Marcus to reply. His response was a single highly arrogant sentence. He agreed to meet at 2 o'clock the next afternoon at the downtown precinct. He truly believed he had completely crushed me. He thought his wealth and his toxic public relations campaign had forced me to my knees in total surrender. The following day, I arrived at the police station a full 2 hours before our scheduled meeting. I did not wait in the public lobby. I was immediately escorted back into the secure, heavily restricted Major Crimes Division to meet with Officer Hayes and the lead investigator, Detective Vance. I sat across from them at a battered metal desk and pulled 3 encrypted flash drives from my heavy coat pocket. I laid them out in a neat straight line on the steel surface. I calmly walked the 2 seasoned law enforcement officers through the digital timeline I had painstakingly constructed over the last 48 hours. I showed them the global positioning system logs that tracked Julian's exact movements down to the square foot on that mountain. I played the recovered audio recording of Marcus violently threatening his son. Finally, I showed them the high-definition security footage from the backup cloud server, clearly displaying Marcus shoving a terrified teenager into the freezing blizzard. The change in the room was instant and deeply chilling. The detectives did not say a single word. They simply watched the undeniable, horrific proof of a brutal crime unfold on their monitors. Their jaws tightened, and a cold professional fury settled over them. We formulated a strict foolproof plan for the 2 o'clock mediation. When Marcus and Vanessa finally strolled into the police station lobby, they looked absolutely radiant. They were dressed in impeccably tailored dark business attire, looking more like they were arriving at an exclusive red carpet premiere than a police precinct. Vanessa clutched her expensive designer handbag, a smug, victorious smirk, playing clearly on her painted lips. Marcus walked with his chest puffed out, practically radiating arrogant triumph. They assumed they were walking into a room to accept my total pathetic surrender. We were guided into a small, windowless interrogation room that had been temporarily repurposed for our so-called mediation. A large two-way mirror dominated the right wall. I knew exactly who was standing on the other side of that glass. Marcus did not even wait for us to sit down before he tossed a thick, legally binding document onto the center of the scratched metal table. "Sign it!" Marcus ordered, his voice dripping with absolute, undeniable contempt. "You officially surrender all medical and legal guardianship of Julian back to me right now. You sign a strict non-disclosure agreement stating you will never speak to the press, and you publicly apologize for stealing my son. In exchange, Vanessa will graciously take down the posts, and my lawyers will call off the massive defamation lawsuit that is about to bankrupt you." I picked up the thick stack of paper, pretending to nervously scan the first page. My hands were perfectly still. "You really want to drag him back to that mountain house?" I asked, keeping my voice small and intentionally wavering. Vanessa said he was having a severe psychological breakdown. He ran away wildly into the snow, remember? Vanessa sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes in sheer annoyance. "He is very sick, Aurora. He needs his family to manage his dangerous delusions." "But that is the part I simply do not understand," I said, looking up, dropping the heavy papers back onto the table. I leaned forward slightly. If he was completely out of his mind running into a lethal winter storm with no winter coat, why did you two just let him go? Why did you not call an ambulance right then? Marcus slammed his heavy hand onto the table, his face flushing with sudden intense anger. He absolutely hated being questioned, especially by someone he viewed as entirely beneath him. "We did not let him go. He stole from us. He is a thief and a manipulative liar. So you just watched him freeze." I pushed harder, my voice rising sharply, intentionally, striking directly at the fragile core of his massive ego. "You watched a sick 19-year-old boy stand on your freezing porch for 3 agonizing hours, and neither of you did a single thing. Did you even check the door? Was the handle stuck? The handle was not stuck. Marcus roared, his temper violently snapping exactly as I knew it would. He leaned forcefully across the table, his face mere inches from mine, his eyes burning with absolute uncontrollable rage. He deserved to freeze. I pushed him out there myself. I turned the deadbolt and locked the damn door to teach the little brat a lesson about respect. I am the one who makes the rules, and if he disobeys me, he suffers the ultimate consequences. He stayed out there because I absolutely refused to let him back inside. The deafening echo of his furious shout bounced off the concrete walls of the small room. Marcus stood there breathing heavily, his chest heaving, deeply satisfied with his dominant, terrifying outburst. He thought he had just put me in my place. He thought his power in this room was absolute. He did not realize he had just loudly and proudly confessed to felony, reckless endangerment, and attempted manslaughter in a room permanently wired for sound right in front of a mirror, hiding the entire major crimes unit. I leaned back in my hard plastic chair, a slow, freezing smile finally spreading across my face. The trap had just snapped shut perfectly. Marcus's final word was still hanging in the stale air of the interrogation room when the heavy metal door abruptly swung inward with a loud, authoritative crash. He jumped, his face snapping toward the doorway. Officer Hayes stepped into the confined space, flanked by Detective Vance and 2 additional uniformed officers. The relaxed, observing demeanor the police had maintained at the hospital was completely gone. In its place was the rigid, uncompromising stance of the law executing justice. Marcus Sutherland. Detective Vance stated, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that commanded absolute silence. He pulled a thick stack of officially stamped paperwork from his jacket. I hold in my hand a signed, executed warrant for your immediate arrest. You are being charged with felony reckless endangerment, aggravated assault resulting in severe bodily harm, and attempted manslaughter. We are also adding charges for filing a false police report and obstruction of justice. Marcus froze, the blood rapidly draining from his flushed face until his skin resembled a pale, sickly shade of gray. His jaw dropped slightly, his arrogant bravado instantly evaporating into thin air. "This is completely absurd," he sputtered, his voice suddenly lacking its booming authority. "You cannot arrest me. I demand to call my legal team right this second. This woman manipulated the conversation. She tricked me." Detective Vance did not even blink. He reached over to a small media console sitting on a side table and pressed a button. A large flat-screen monitor mounted on the concrete wall flickered to life. "We do not need her to trick you, sir. We have the digital footprint you tried so desperately to erase." The screen illuminated the small room, casting a harsh, cold glow over Marcus and Vanessa. The high-definition security video from the hidden cloud backup server began to play. There was Marcus, clearly visible, violently shoving his 19-year-old son out into the raging blizzard. The video plainly showed him slamming the heavy wooden door shut and aggressively throwing the deadbolt. Then Detective Vance played the audio recording I had recovered from the shattered cell phone. Marcus's own cruel, mocking words echoed off the walls, telling his son to walk 10 miles in the freezing snow to learn some respect. Finally, the detective displayed the precise global positioning system data from the smartwatch, proving undeniably that the boy had stood freezing on that porch for 3 agonizing hours. "We have the weapon, we have the timeline, and you just provided the verbal confession on a silver platter," Officer Hayes added, stepping forward with a pair of heavy steel handcuffs glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. "Your money cannot buy your way out of a mountain of irrefutable hard evidence." As the cold metal clamped tightly around Marcus's wrists with a resounding final click, total pandemonium erupted on the other side of the table. Vanessa, realizing the absolute devastation of the situation, completely shattered her carefully constructed loving mother facade. She leaped out of her chair, backing away from her husband as if he were suddenly radioactive. "I had absolutely nothing to do with this," Vanessa shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical, piercing wail. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly at Marcus. "He is a monster. He locked the door. He is the one who forced me to write those horrible things on social media about Aurora." He threatened to cut off my finances if I did not help him destroy her reputation. You have to believe me, I am a victim of his abuse too. Marcus snapped his head toward her, his eyes wide with absolute betrayal and sheer shock. The wealthy, powerful titan of industry was completely collapsing before my eyes, stripped of his expensive armor, reduced to a pathetic cornered criminal watching his own trophy wife throw him entirely under the bus to save her own skin. He sank heavily into his hard plastic chair, his broad shoulders slumping in total defeat. He stared blankly at the floor, finally realizing the horrifying magnitude of his reality. He was going to a concrete prison cell, and his entire empire was completely finished. The fallout was incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. Once the official police statements hit the major news networks, the public narrative reversed with the brutal force of a hurricane. The same digital mob that had blindly attacked me only a few days prior now directed their absolute fury entirely at Marcus and Vanessa. Major national news outlets played the audio recording of Marcus throwing his son into the storm. The public backlash was completely unprecedented. Major corporate investors panicked and immediately pulled their massive funding. The board of directors at his primary company voted unanimously to strip him of his chief executive officer title within 24 hours. His businesses faced massive nationwide boycotts, hemorrhaging millions of dollars practically overnight. Meanwhile, the overwhelming flood of hatred directed at my inbox transformed into an outpouring of deep, sincere apologies and massive public support. Zenith Meridian Corporation publicly commended my actions, and the cruel, toxic smear campaign Vanessa had orchestrated completely disintegrated, leaving her facing her own severe criminal charges for extreme cyber harassment and accessory to attempted manslaughter. 3 long, grueling weeks later, the storm had finally passed both outside and inside our lives. I drove my car up to the front entrance of the Physical Rehabilitation Center. The automatic doors slid open, and a nurse wheeled Julian out into the crisp, bright morning air. He had lost 2 toes on his left foot to the severe frostbite, and he would need months of intense physical therapy to walk perfectly again. But he was alive. He was smiling. That evening, we sat together in my cozy, warmly lit living room. A bright fire crackled cheerfully in the stone fireplace, casting a soft golden glow across the room. Julian was resting comfortably on the plush sofa, wrapped in a thick, heated blanket, sipping a mug of hot cocoa. I sat in the armchair across from him, watching the flames dance. We did not talk about Marcus. We did not talk about Vanessa or the massive legal battles still to come. We simply sat in the quiet, profound comfort of our shared sanctuary. We had faced the absolute darkest, coldest depths of human cruelty, and we had completely destroyed the monsters hiding in the snow. Leaving behind the toxic, suffocating weight of his past, Julian was finally safe. We were completely, truly free. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Violet Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.